Welcome back to the garden upstairs. It's still fairly early in the growing season, so I thought I'd give you a quick rundown on my tomatoes. Maybe you'll want to grow some of what I'm growing. I'm not going to try and be suspenseful. I'm going to come right out and say that I am not very happy with growing tomatoes. I had a lot of problems with them last year, but all of my plants died, and I just chalked it up to first-year rookie mistakes. There was no reason for me to single out the tomatoes. It wouldn't have made sense. But I'm having a lot of the same problems this year. I've had my garden up and running for about 3 to 4 months this year, and everything except my tomatoes is doing great, and I'm not happy about that. I know it's my fault they're failing, but it really doesn't make it any easier to deal with. I have 4.5 varieties of tomatoes. I'll explain the half later. They all started really strong. They made me really proud. They got me really excited, and I thought I was the greatest gardener ever. And then, as you can see, 2 weeks of June gloom followed up by about 2 hours of sprinkles was not good for my tomatoes. I had to pluck a lot of leaves off due to various forms of mold, mildew, and blight. The Jersey Devil took the brunt of it, but as you can see, it was such a big plant to start out with. It actually looks pretty decent after the heavy pruning. That was about 2 weeks ago. All of the plants had powdery mildew. Some of them had some leaves that were changing colors. I thought it was blight, and then I thought it was a mineral deficiency, but now I know for sure that at least 3 of my plants have blight. I pluck the stems and the leaves off when they show signs of the powdery mildew or the blight. I tried some home remedy sprays, but they really don't act fast enough. It spreads through the plants before the sprays can have any effect. The big container plants are still chugging away making fruit, but they're really bare and skeletal. It's nowhere near the jungle of fruit that I want for the balcony. So here are my thoughts on each plant pre-disease, in case you still have time to plant some tomatoes. This is an Indigo Rose tomato, one of the many types of black or blue tomatoes. As you can see, it is the definition of prolific. At one point, it had over 100 fruit on this plant. The downside to that is that the fruit take forever to ripen. So at one point I did go through and trim off a lot of the flowers and even some of the pollinated buds just to speed up the ripening of the fruits that were already established. The first fruit to fully ripen so that I could taste it took almost 3 months, which just seems crazy to me when you consider that it's barely larger than a golf ball. My beefsteak next to it developed fruit to a larger size, not fully ripe for a beefsteak, but much larger size in half the time, which just seems weird to me. Here's a clip of me taste testing that first Indigo Rose. Hi there. Just plucked my first tomato of the season. This is one of my Indigo Rose tomatoes. It took quite a while to ripen. A few months, actually. As you can see, what makes the Indigo Rose special is that it turns a dark blue just about black where the sun hits it. Where the sun doesn't hit it, it's red. So, I'm going to cut this thing open, and I'm going to see if it was worth all of the effort. So, let's try this thing out. Well, that's really weird. I'm going to try another piece here before I say something, because it's really weird. Yeah, so I'm going to have to do some research, because I'm getting a very weird flavor here. And the only way that I can describe it is it tastes like beef jerky. Yeah, that's really weird. I was not expecting that. A lot of the reviews said that it was a very plain tasting tomato. But That did not taste very plain to me. It was very unique. I'll have to try some more when they ripen, see what that's like. Maybe it was just a fluke. I did get to taste another Indigo Rose since then, and as weird as it sounds, I did get the same flavor. I did a little research, and the best I can come up with is that the flavor I'm trying to describe is Worcestershire sauce. I know that doesn't make it less weird, but I think it's accurate. It's not a strong flavor, it's subtle, but it's still a unique flavor that I've never gotten in any other tomato. The Indigo Rose is very prolific, even though the fruit take forever to ripen, and I do like the flavor of it. And as you may notice, it did survive the moisture-induced illnesses a lot better than the other plants. So you would expect that I would love this plant, but I probably won't grow it again, and here's why. The leaves curl up like it's dying. I googled extensively when it first started happening, thinking that I was killing this plant that I bought specifically because it looked so hardy. But through all that googling, it seems that it's just a thing that they do. My hypothesis based on that googling is that the indigo rose, having been bred to like sunlight in order to create the antioxidants that make it blue, does not like cool weather. Which means that this plant starts shivering when the nights drop to a cool 50 degrees. It's kind of like how the Midwesterners make fun of us Southern California folks for putting on pants when it's not even snowing. I want pretty plants, a jungle of food, as I've said many times. And no matter how prolific a plant is, if it looks near death, even when it's perfectly healthy, then I don't really want it. So I think I would much rather experiment with other types of tomatoes than grow the indigo rose again. This next one is pretty cool. This guy behind me is a volunteer in my container garden. I'm pretty sure that it's an Aussie tomato, a big red lobed tomato, but the thing is I don't remember it making any fruit last year. It got big and leafy, it made some flowers, but then it got powdery mildew and I pulled it because it never made any fruit. But then this year I started getting ready to do my planting and these little tomato looking seedlings started popping up, so I let them go. And I've got more fruit than I did last year. The plant looks pretty skeletal. It took some pretty extensive pruning to try and save it. It doesn't have many fruit, although the fruit that it does have are pretty neat looking. It's got a lot of flowers which aren't fruiting, and I think that might be because I let 3 plants grow in such a small space. They're competing for nutrients. It's not giving the plant the energy it needs to make more of these big, awesome tomatoes. This one I would definitely try again. With better care to prevent illness and thinning it to a single plant in a given space, I think that this could be a very prolific plant. If I could get all of those flowers to turn into those big lobed tomatoes, then this would be a pretty sweet plant to have. And I think that I could do it. Behind me is the plant that I expected to be my top producer. Last year, it was the only non-eggplant to give me multiple fruit. With no fertilizer in my error-prone garden, this Jersey Devil managed to eke out 5 to 10 pointy-bottomed Roma tomatoes. So I expected big things out of this plant, and I think that my high regard is probably what killed it. Because I held the Jersey Devil in such high regard, I didn't take care of it. I let it do its own thing. I didn't prune it. I didn't even pull the suckers. I just let it go au naturel. It kept chugging along, even after the other tomatoes started getting their powdery mildew and their deficiencies or blight or whatever I thought it was at the time. It just kept chugging along, so I let it be. Then the actual precipitation came, and that dense jungle of Jersey Devil plant, it didn't stand a chance. It got decimated by the powdery mildew. You can see that it's still doing somewhat decent, but if you get close to it, come around to the other side, you see that it's got some serious issues. I need to prune it big time. It got more fruit growing than it did last year, but if I have to pull off all of these infected leaves, then I'm pretty sure it's gonna run out of leaves long before the fruit can ripen. I would definitely consider growing the Jersey Devil again. It's an incredibly hardy plant, and even in my small space, I have no doubts that it would give me enough tomatoes to make a large pot of sauce, which was my goal for this season. If this plant works out, then I will make a sauce video for sure, but my optimism is pretty well waned. I'm pretty sure it has full-blown blight at this point. This is the half a plant I mentioned. It is a white beauty. It's considered a white tomato, but it really is more of a yellow, and it is delicious. But this plant is a sucker of a diseased plant, which is why I call it half a plant. It might make it. It's really only here because I love the fruit, and I'm hoping that one of these guys is going to be edible. Maybe even give me some good seeds. I did get one tomato out of the white beauty last year, and it was so delicious that I just devoured it, and I didn't bother saving the seeds because I expected to get more, and then the plant died. So I've just been trying to get one more tomato out of it, growing it from suckers, and this is basically my last try. I do want to grow them again because I think they're really delicious, but I think next season, or whenever I do try them again, I will try to get new seeds or order a whole new plant. Last is our beefsteak tomato. And I will tell you that as sickly as this thing looks, I would not hesitate to grow it again as soon as possible. Yes, it is way smaller than the other plants despite being planted at the same time. And yes, it looks like it belongs in an intensive care unit talking to a priest. But take a look at that pot that it's in. I should not have planted an indeterminate tomato in a pot that small. Letting two plants grow in a pot that small was just a stupid rookie mistake. Look down here. Look what happens when I brush away the mulch. You see that? You see how incredibly root bound it is? How the roots are trying to grow up through the mulch because I planted it in such a small pot? After having seen that, let's take another look at this plant. Doesn't look quite so sickly anymore, does it? Kind of looks like one of those octogenarians you see running the marathons. He may look kind of frail. He'll still teach you a thing or two. Imagine what this thing would have done if I would have planted it in one of the big containers and spaced it properly. Imagine a 6-foot plant with a bunch of these giant tomatoes on it. These things are going to get huge. Well, they would be if they were on a healthy plant. So yes, I will most definitely be trying to grow the beefsteak tomatoes in the future. I really wish I would have at least gotten pictures of these tomato plants when they were in their prime. They were magnificent. They made me think that I was actually a good gardener and not just some noob. They gave me the confidence to actually make these videos, and I let all of that success go to my head. I knew that poor circulation and damp conditions were going to wreak havoc on tomato plants, but after 1 year of gardening, I thought that I knew everything. I thought that I knew more than every one of those articles I said that told me how important it is to prune your plants for proper circulation. I got lazy, and now I have a balcony garden that's riddled with dead or dying tomato plants. So prune your tomatoes, people. It's really important. After filming the initial part of this episode, I went ahead and pruned off all of the stricken leaves on each of the plants. And I think I got them all, but as you can see, they are incredibly bare now, which led to the executive decision to chop off all of the unpollinated flowers so that the plants are sending all of their energy directly to the fruit that are already here. Hopefully, that means the plants will give me some fruit before I ultimately pull them and replace them with something else.
I was tempted to pull some of them right now, but since I have nothing to take their place, there's not really any benefit to it. Might as well see what I can get.
As always, if you appreciate the video, you found it helpful, please hit the like button. If you want to laugh at my rookie mistakes or share some of your favorite tomato types, please leave a comment. And if you want to see more videos about the garden, please hit the subscribe button. I hope to see you again back upstairs in the garden.